My name is Lydia, and I am 58 years old. For the past 20 months, my entire world has revolved around one date, my only son David's wedding day. Being his mother was my greatest pride. I raised him alone after his father passed, working long hours to give him a good life. When he brought home Chloe, I tried so hard to be welcoming. I offered my life savings to help pay for their dream wedding. I just wanted his happiness. I never imagined that dream would end with her looking at me in a room filled with flowers and telling me to leave. I stood before the mirror that morning, fastening the pearl necklace my late husband gave me, wondering if he would be proud of the woman I had become. The day meant to be a culmination of joy was about to take a turn I could never have prepared for. Before I share what happened in those final moments before the ceremony, I am curious about where you are in your own life right now. Are you listening from a quiet kitchen, or maybe during your commute? Wherever you are, take a second to say hello in the comments below. If this story about family love and unexpected strength resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to stay with me through this journey. Sometimes the quietest strength is forged in the most public of moments, and I have a feeling you might understand that. That Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect California day. The air smelled like jasmine from my garden. I remember thinking how Jack, my husband, would have loved to see his boy all grown up. David was 28, handsome and kind, or at least the man I raised was kind. The man he became around Chloe was someone I was still learning. I put on my dress, a simple lavender sheath. It felt like armor. The venue was a stunning vineyard estate in Napa, all rolling hills and elegant stone buildings. Chloe had chosen it. She chose everything. From the moment David proposed, she took over the planning with a firm, meticulous hand. My suggestions for a local florist or a family friend who baked were met with a tight smile. That's sweet, Lydia, but we have a specific vision. The vision was expensive. When David, his voice thick with embarrassment, asked if I could help, I didn't hesitate. I tapped into savings, into the small safety net Jack left me. I became the checkbook. I signed contracts for the venue, the catering, the 5-tier cake, the string quartet, the photographer from San Francisco. I was happy to do it. It was my gift, my final big act of motherhood, or so I thought. As I drove to the vineyard, I replayed the last 2 years. Chloe was 26 sharp and ambitious. She came from a well-off family in Los Angeles who viewed my modest life in Sacramento with polite disinterest. At first, I thought her confidence was admirable. She was good for David, pushing him to ask for that promotion. But slowly, I was phased out. Weekend visits became shorter. Phone calls were always cut off because Chloe and I have plans. My heart ached, but I told myself that's what happens. Your child builds a new family. You take a back seat. You be grateful for any seat at all. The problem was, I was starting to feel like I wasn't even in the car anymore. I was the mechanic who paid for the gas, waiting by the side of the road. When I arrived at the vineyard, the valet took my sensible sedan surrounded by sleeker cars. The place buzzed with activity. Everyone looked young and beautiful. I saw David across the lawn, laughing with his groomsmen. My heart swelled. He saw me and gave a quick wave but didn't come over. A coordinator whisked him away. I found my sister Evelyn near the entrance. She hugged me tight. "You look beautiful, Lyd. How are you holding up?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just want everything to be perfect for him." She squeezed my hand, her eyes knowing. "It already is. You made sure of that." Her words were meant to comfort, but they felt like a verdict. I had made it perfect financially. But as a mother, as Lydia, I felt utterly invisible. The ceremony was in 30 minutes. Guests were being seated. A sudden irrational need to see my son, to have one moment before he became a husband, pulled me towards the bridal suite. I wanted to give him his father's old cufflinks, something old, something of ours. I walked down the cool stone hallway, the sounds of the string quartet, tuning up, floating in the air. The door to the suite was slightly ajar. I could see flashes of white silk and hear the low murmur of women's voices. I knocked lightly and pushed the door open. The room was a blur of expensive perfume and bustling activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, bridesmaids in matching robes. And in the center, standing before a full-length mirror, was Chloe. Her dress was a masterpiece, all lace and beading worth more than my car. She turned, and for a second I saw not a bride, but a CEO assessing an uninvited guest. Her smile was cold professional. "Lydia." "Is everything all right?" I held up the small velvet box. "I just wanted to give David these, his father's, for good luck." She didn't take it. "He's with the groomsmen. You can give them to him later." She turned back to the mirror, dismissing me, but then she paused, looked at my reflection, and her expression shifted. It wasn't annoyance anymore. It was decision. She turned to face me fully, and the room seemed to quiet. "Actually, Lydia, now that you're here, I need to say something." Her voice was clear, calm, devoid of any bridal warmth. "I think it would be best if you left the wedding." The words didn't compute. I blinked. "I'm sorry." She took a small step forward. "Today is about David and me, a fresh start. Your presence, it creates an old energy. It makes him feel guilty. He needs to focus on our future, not the past. You've done your part. Thank you for everything. But you should go now." My eyes darted past her, searching for David. He was standing in the corner, half hidden by a rack of clothing. His face was pale, his shoulders slumped. Our eyes met. In his, I saw sheer panic and a desperate silent plea for me to just comply, to make this easy for him. "David." My voice was a whisper. He looked at the floor. "Mum, I'm sorry. We'll talk later. It's complicated. I have to do what's right for my marriage." In that moment, the floor didn't drop out. It solidified into ice cold and unyielding beneath my feet. Every sacrifice, every late night, every ounce of love I had poured into this man crystallized into a single shattering truth. He was letting her do this. He was choosing to let me be discarded. I didn't feel anger first. I felt a profound, silent shattering. The mother in me broke. I looked at Chloe, her gaze steady and challenging. I looked back at David, who refused to lift his head. I nodded once slowly, a deep, mechanical nod. I placed the velvet box containing Jack's cufflinks on a nearby vanity. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't run. I walked down the long hallway, the music now swelling into the processional song. I walked past the seated guests, out the grand doors, into the blinding sunshine. I found my car. I sat in the driver's seat. The pearl necklace felt like a noose. I stared at the vineyard, at the golden light streaming from the windows where my son was about to get married. And in that hollow, silent space, something else was born. Not grief, not yet. It was a cold, clear, and absolutely unshakable resolve. I drove the hour and a half home in complete silence. The radio was off. There was only the hum of the engine and the roar of my own thoughts. I walked into my house, the house where I raised David. His childhood photos smiled from the walls. His first soccer trophy sat on the bookshelf. The silence was a physical weight. I went to my bedroom, unclasped the pearls, let the dress pool on the floor. I put on my softest sweatpants and an old university sweatshirt. I went to the kitchen, the heart of our home, and made a cup of tea. I knew I wouldn't drink. The house felt like a museum, dedicated to a life that was over. Every object told a story of a boy who was gone, replaced by a stranger in a tuxedo. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I helped him with multiplication tables, where we celebrated his college acceptance. Now it was just me and the crushing weight of what had just happened. After an hour of just sitting, the numbness began to recede, at the edges replaced by a sharp, almost painful clarity. I had to move. I went to my small home office, a little nook off the living room that used to be a pantry. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Inside was a folder labeled David's Wedding. It was thick, cumbersome. In it were copies of every contract, every deposit slip, every email, confirmation, every vendor invoice. I was the primary contact and the guarantor on almost all of them. The final payments totaling more than $30,000 were due on various schedules, some next week, some upon the event's completion. I spread the papers on the desk, a mosaic of obligation and expectation. The caterer Gourmet Visions, with a final bill of $12,000. The vineyard venue, La Belle Vigne, with a staggering balance due of $15,000. The photographer, a trendy artist from San Francisco, with a $4,000 package. The florist, Gary's Bloom and Bow, a man whose gentle demeanor had made the planning sessions almost pleasant. The bakery for the elaborate cake. The string quartet. As I looked at them, the reality of my position became crystalline. I had not been a guest. I had been a sponsor, a financier. The event had just revoked my access, but not my liability. Or so they thought. I picked up the phone. My hand was steady. My first call was to Gary the florist. It was a test, a probe into the feasibility of my sudden stark plan. Gary, it's Lydia Carter. Lydia, shouldn't you be dancing at the reception? His voice was warm, tinged with the happy exhaustion of a busy wedding day. I kept my voice level, professional, devoid of the tremor I felt in my core. Gary, there's been a significant change in circumstances. I will not be able to fulfill the final payment for the wedding florals for the Carter wedding today. Furthermore, I need to cancel the order entirely and request a refund of my deposit. I have been formally excluded from the event and am no longer a participant or benefactor. I will send you a formal email to confirm this immediately, citing the relevant order numbers. I am so sorry for the inconvenience. There was a long pause. I could hear the faint rustle of papers, his breath on the line. Oh, Lydia. My God, I had no idea. I understand. Of course. Send the email. I'll take care of it on my end. Don't you worry about a thing. That first call was the key turning in the lock. His compassion didn't weaken my resolve. It clarified it. This wasn't about revenge or causing chaos for its own sake. It was a simple, brutal business logic. You cannot burn the bridge and still expect supplies to cross it. I was simply ceasing delivery. One by one, I began to make the calls and send the emails. I was calm, polite, and unyielding. I cited the contracts, provided my details, and stated the reason with a stark clarity that brooked no argument. I was no longer a participant in the event and was withdrawing my financial sponsorship immediately. With the venue manager, a man named Robert, it was more complex. He was initially shocked, then argumentative, threatening breach of contract and legal action. I remained steely. I reminded him the contract was with me, Lydia Carter, my social security number, my signature. I stated that the event was now proceeding without my knowledge or consent, and that I was revoking my financial guarantee. I instructed him to seek immediate payment from the other parties present at the venue, namely David and Chloe. By 10 p.m., it was done. My desk was a landscape of highlighted contracts and scribbled notes. My phone, which had been silent, began to vibrate on the desk. Then it lit up, over and over, a frantic strobe light in the quiet room. David, Chloe, unknown numbers. I watched it ring, a strange spectator to the storm I had set in motion. I read the text previews that flashed on the screen. David, Mom, where are you? We need to talk. Then 30 minutes later, Mom, the venue manager just called. What did you do? Then answer your phone. This is a disaster. Chloe's message was one word, all caps, unbelievable. I placed the phone face down. The silence returned, but now it was different. It was charged with the echo of my own actions, a potent, frightening quiet. I had just declared my own financial and emotional independence. The collateral damage was my relationship with my son. I poured a glass of water, my hand finally showing a slight tremor. Across the county, my son's perfect wedding was unraveling, the bills coming due in real time. And in the wreckage of my heart, I felt the first faint spark of something I hadn't felt in years, a sensation so foreign it took me a moment to name it, a sliver of self-respect. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my kitchen window, feeling harsh and accusatory. I turned my phone on. It erupted with a cacophony of notifications, 23 missed calls, 12 voicemails, a torrent of frantic texts. The most recent was from David, sent at 2:45 a.m. "How could you do this to us? We are ruined." The photographer left halfway through dinner. "The caterer is threatening to sue. This is my wedding." The doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound. It was Evelyn, her face etched with worry, bearing a paper bag of pastries and 2 large coffees. She pulled me into a hug without a word. "I left when I couldn't find you after the ceremony," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. What in God's name happened? I told her everything, my voice flat, reciting the facts, like a news report. The walk to the suite, Chloe's words, David's averted gaze, my silent exit, the long drive, the phone calls. Her face darkened from concern to pure, undiluted fury. "That little witch, that spineless boy. I'll drive there right now and give them a piece of my mind they'll never forget." I held her arm, my grip firm. "No, Evelyn. That's exactly what they'd expect. The hysterical mother, the dramatic scene. I won't give them that. I won't give them anything. But Lydia," she whispered, her eyes wet, "this could cut him out of your life forever. Are you prepared for that?" I looked past her to the dining table, where the pile of cancelled contracts and printed confirmation emails sat like a monument. "Evelyn," I said softly, "he did that yesterday at 4:17 p.m. I'm just making the paperwork match the reality." The doorbell rang again, this time followed by a rapid, impatient knocking. Through the sidelight, I saw them. David and Chloe, still in their wedding clothes, from the day before, looking crumpled, exhausted, and vibrating with fury. David's tuxedo shirt was untucked. Chloe's elaborate updo was a lopsided mess. I took a deep, steadying breath and opened the door. They pushed past me into the living room without invitation. The air grew thick with their anger. Chloe's beautiful face was twisted into a mask of contempt. "What is wrong with you?" She spat, her voice shrill. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We are humiliated. We had to beg the band to stay. We owe thousands right now." David looked at me, his eyes bloodshot and bewildered. "Mom, why? How could you be so cruel? This was our wedding day. Our one day I waited for them to finish, for the torrent to slow. I felt a strange, detached calm settle over me, like I was watching the scene from behind a thick pane of glass. "You made a choice yesterday," I said, my voice quiet, but so clear it cut through their noise. "You chose to have me removed from my son's wedding. You, Chloe, called my presence old energy. You said David needed a fresh start away from me. So I gave you one, a completely fresh start. You start your marriage with the full financial obligations you created without my subsidization. I do not pay for parties I am explicitly told to leave. It's a very simple principle," David sputtered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "That's not... You can't just... That money was a gift for us." "A gift," I repeated, looking only at him, trying to find my son in this desperate stranger's face, "is given freely from the heart to a loved one. Yesterday, in that room, you both showed me I am not that. You are an adult, David. Adults pay for their own choices. They pay for the weddings they want, and they pay for the consequences of the people they choose to become." Chloe stepped forward, her finger jabbing the air toward me. "You are a bitter, lonely old woman, trying to destroy our happiness because you have none of your own. We'll sue you for every penny. You'll hear from our lawyer." I almost smiled, then a thin, cold curve of my lips. "The contracts are in my name. The deposits were from my personal and business accounts. The emails confirming my withdrawal are time-stamped and sent. You are welcome to try. My lawyer is Ben Carter. You can have your people call my people." Using Jack's old friend's name, invoking that old-world formality, felt like summoning a ghost for protection. David's face crumbled, then the anger dissolving into something pathetic and pleading. "Mom, please. We can fix this. Just call them back. Undo it. Pay the bills, and we can forget this ever happened. We can be a family. That was the moment. That precise sentence. Any lingering hope, any shred of the mother who would fix every boo-boo and soothe every hurt, died a final death. He still didn't see it. He saw a technical glitch, a financial problem to be solved with my money and my silence. He did not see the broken bond, the profound betrayal. No, I said the word final as a stone dropping. The conversation is over. Get out of my house. I walked to the front door and held it open, staring at a point on the wall beyond them. They left a storm of impotent rage. Chloe muttering curses. David shooting me a last wounded look. I closed the door. The click of the lock was deafening. I leaned against the solid wood, my whole body trembling with the adrenaline of the confrontation. I had just drawn a line in the sand with my only child, and then I had watched him choose to stand on the other side. The silence that followed their departure was terrifying in its completeness, and for the first time in decades, it was entirely unquestionably mine. The following weeks were a grey, painful haze. The initial shock and resolve gave way to a grief so deep it was physical. It sat on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I cried in the shower where the sound was muffled. I stared at the walls of my empty house, the memories now feeling like accusations. My bookstore. Chapters suffered. I moved through it like a ghost, ringing up sales, ordering inventory. But my heart wasn't in it. The joy I'd always found in the smell of paper and ink was gone. Evelyn checked on me daily sometimes, just sitting with me in silence, sometimes forcing me to go for a walk. I contacted Ben Carter, the lawyer. He reviewed everything, his demeanor kind, but professional. He confirmed I was on solid legal ground. The contracts were clear. My actions, while severe, were a direct response to a fundamental change in the nature of the agreement, my exclusion from the event. He also sent a firm cease and desist letter to Chloe's parents when their threats of legal action arrived. The threats stopped. The money from the cancelled services, minus some non-refundable deposits, began to trickle back into my accounts. It felt like blood money. Slowly, mechanically, I began to rebuild a life around the Lydia-shaped hole that had been left by my identity as a mother. It was painstaking work. I forced myself to focus on the store. I created a new window display. I started a weekly book club for women my age, calling it The Next Chapter. I advertised it with little flyers on the community board. The first meeting, only 3 women came. We read a straightforward novel, but somehow the conversation about fictional characters veered into our own real lives, difficult children, lonely marriages, the struggle to find purpose after 50. It was awkward and raw and beautiful. It became a lifeline. I used a portion of the refunded money not for myself, but for the store and for an online art history course from a reputable university. It was a passion I'd abandoned decades ago when Jack died and David needed me. Now, in the evenings, I would sit with my laptop, learning about the Renaissance, about the Medici patrons, about the women painters like Artemisia Gentileschi, who worked in the shadows of great men. Their stories of quiet perseverance of creating beauty, despite profound personal injustice, spoke directly to my soul. News of David and Chloe trickled back through the small-town grapevine from well-meaning but curious acquaintances. They had to take out a high-interest personal loan to cover the immediate debts to the vendors who demanded payment on the spot. The lavish apartment they'd rented was given up. They moved into a small one-bedroom place on the less desirable side of town. Their marriage, born in such drama and financial strain, was reportedly rocky. They were seen arguing in the grocery store. David changed his phone number. I heard this last piece of information from a former neighbor, and I felt a pang so deep and sharp it stole my breath. I went into the back room of the store and pressed my forehead against the cool wall. But I didn't call. I didn't reach out. I had set a boundary, and I had to learn to live on my side of it, even if that side felt desolate. One afternoon, maybe 5 months after the wedding, I was reorganizing the poetry section. The The store was quiet. A line from a Mary Oliver collection caught my eye. "Tell me what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life." I read it once, twice, and I realized with a start that I had stopped crying for David that week. The ache was still there, a permanent part of my internal landscape, now like an old injury that twinges when the weather turns cold, but it no longer controlled the climate of my days. I was surviving. More than that, in those quiet spaces between the pain, I was discovering curiosities, small joys. I had dinner with Evelyn and her husband, and I laughed at one of his terrible jokes, a real unforced laugh. I had regular coffee with Gary the florist, who had become a genuine friend. We talked about the challenges of small business ownership, about losing spouses, about the strange freedom and terror of starting over later in life. The world, which had shrunk to the tiny, desperate size of my son's approval, began achingly slowly to expand again. Nearly 8 months after the wedding, on a rainy Thursday evening, I was closing the store. The Next Chapter book club had just ended, and the space was warm with the residual energy of good conversation and shared stories. The rain pattered softly against the window. As I flipped the open sign to closed, I saw a figure standing under the green and white awning outside, sheltering from the drizzle. It was David. He was alone, wearing a thin canvas jacket that seemed inadequate for the weather. He looked older, thinner, the last vestiges of boyishness completely gone from his face, replaced by a sober, weary maturity. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. For a long moment, we just looked at each other through the glass. Then I unlocked the door and stepped back, holding it open. He came in, bringing with him the scent of damp wool and cold rain. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice quiet, unsure. The store was dim-lit, only by the small brass lamps near the register and the fairy lights I kept strung along the fiction shelves. "David," I acknowledged. We stood there, the space between us, feeling vast, filled with the ghosts of everything unsaid and undone. "Can we talk?" he asked, his eyes scanning the familiar space, the shelves he had grown up around. I nodded towards the reading nook in the back. 2 worn but comfortable armchairs, flanking a small table piled with books. He sat on the edge of one, I settled into the other, leaving my body language open, but guarded. He didn't speak for a long time, just looked at his hands at the rain streaking the dark window. "I'm sorry," he finally said the words, rough as if dragged over gravel. "I am so truly deeply sorry. Not for the money, for letting her do that. For not stopping it the second the words left her mouth, for not defending you, for not being the man you raised me to be." He looked up then, and his eyes were full of a pain I recognized intimately, the pain of self-confrontation. "I got lost, Mum, completely lost. In her family's world, in this glossy magazine idea of a perfect life they sold me. I thought if I just went along, kept my head down, made her happy, I'd have it all. And I was a coward. I traded you for a fantasy." He told me their marriage was in shambles. The financial stress had broken something fundamental between them, almost immediately exposing the shallow transactional foundation their relationship was built on. They were sleeping in separate rooms. They were separating. "What you did," he continued, shaking his head slowly, a look of bewildered awe on his face. "At the time, I thought it was the cruelest, most heartless thing one person could do to another, but it was the only thing that could have woken me up. It was a bucket of ice water. It forced me to look at who I'd become. A man who would let his mother be thrown out of his wedding. A man who would abandon the person who loved him most for an illusion." I listened. I didn't interrupt. I let the river of his words flow, and I felt the old dammed-up love and fresh acute sorrow mingle within me. But the banks of that river were no longer made of soft, yielding earth. They were made of the hard-earned stone of my own survival. "I forgive you, David," I said when he fell silent. The words were true, and saying them lifted a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged. But forgiveness isn't a reset button. It doesn't mean things go back to how they were. What we had is broken. If we build something new, it will be different. It will be slower. It will take time and consistent demonstrable effort. and that effort will have to come mostly from you, and it will never, ever again involve my wallet or me tolerating a single moment of disrespect from anyone in your life, including you." He nodded, tears finally spilling over and tracing clean paths down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. "I know. I don't expect that. I don't want that. I'd like to try to be your son again, if you'll let me." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said the only thing I had learned I could truly trust, the mantra of my new life. We'll take it one day at a time. That was 6 months ago. Today, my life is not the life I thought I would have at 58. I am not a doting grandmother, not the central sun around which all orbits figure in my son's daily life. The picture I had painted for my future is gone, the canvas scraped clean. But on that blank space, I am slowly, carefully painting a new picture. I am Lydia Carter, bookstore owner. I am an art history enthusiast who can now give a decent impromptu lecture on Caravaggio's use of chiaroscuro. I am a friend to Evelyn and to Gary, relationships that have deepened in mutual respect. I am a sister. I am a facilitator of a book club where women find their voices. I have a quiet, full self-determined life. David and I meet for coffee once a month at a neutral cafe downtown. It's awkward sometimes, the conversation's stilted. Other times it's tender, and we talk about a book he's reading or a memory of his father that doesn't hurt as much. We are learning a new language, one for adults, not for a mother and her child. He is in therapy, he tells me. He is working 2 jobs to pay off the debts from the wedding, the debts of his own making. I see the man I raised, re-emerging from the wreckage, humbler, more real, stripped of the pretense. He doesn't ask for anything, he just shows up. The lesson I learned was not about winning or getting even. It was not a triumphant revenge story. It was about the true, often brutal economy of love. Unconditional love for your child does not mean unconditional funding for their poor character or their cowardly choices. Self-respect is not a luxury you can sacrifice on the altar of motherhood. It is the very foundation. Without it, you have nothing of substance to offer anyone, not even your own child. And sometimes the most loving word you can say is no, a no that echoes with the painful, necessary sound of a boundary being firmly, finally built. My story isn't about a villainous bride or a perfect cinematic revenge. It's about an ordinary woman who got lost in the all-consuming role of mom and had to find her way back, step by agonizing step, to being a person. The path led straight through the heartbreak of my own child's rejection, but it led me home to myself. So I want to ask you, from my quiet bookstore to wherever you are listening right now, have you ever had to set a painful, seemingly impossible boundary with someone you love deeply? How did you find the strength to hold that line, even when every instinct told you to cave? What did you discover about yourself on the other side of that decision? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and it is in sharing these truths that we find we are not alone. If this journey of finding strength in silence, of choosing self-respect over self-sacrifice, resonated with you, please hit the like button. It lets me know these difficult stories matter, that they have value. If you are new here and want to join me for more honest conversations about life, family, grief, and the quiet work of rediscovering ourselves, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And if you know someone who might be struggling to find their voice in a difficult relationship, who might need to hear that it's okay to say no, please share this video with them. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is the simple, powerful reminder that they are not alone and that their worth is non-negotiable. Thank you for listening, for sharing this space and this time with me. However you are navigating your own complex relationships, your own heartaches and hopes, I wish you peace, and I wish you the quiet, unwavering strength to honor your own worth every single day. Take care.